In today's episode, we discuss Part 5, Part 6, an epilogue, and the notes on sources of When the Night Comes Falling by Howard Blum. Was the defense investigating a drug theory? Was the drug task force using college students as informants? Is Emma Bailey the connection? Did Steve Gonsalves find the informant? And did the grand jury jurors leak bombshell information about the survivors? We discuss all of this and more. This was the best part of the book, so you won't want to miss it. As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and a speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. And today we are doing Part 5, Part 6, and the epilogue of Howard Blum's book, When the Night Comes Falling.
Yes, you got it.
I got it. And really spirited discussion in the last episode. So I really like, even though I defend my position, I think you defend your position, but
yeah, I had to come a little strong.
No, I like that because I really like to hear the other side. I like to hear where there's holes, or help me make sense of this, right?
Yes.
Because it's just, it doesn't line up, and I'm sure that we'll get some of that. We won't get all of it.
Yes.
But I think now where we're at in this case, because of the gag order, it leads to speculation. It leads to these debates. It leads to these conversations. And to be honest with you, I actually enjoy it. So
yep, I do too.
All right. So let's bring it.
And we're doing, we're going all the way to the end of the book because Part 6 is just one chapter and then the epilogue. So we thought let's just try to do them all together. So
for sure.
This is Part 5, and it starts with Chapter 29, The Defense's Story.
Defense's Story.
Yes. So the author starts off with talking about, what's the quote he says? When you have the evidence, you pound the facts, and when you don't, you pound the table.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So he just starts getting into the legalese of, we're entering defense territory. Start talking about Ann Taylor, and she gets hired as Brian's state-appointed defense attorney because she has handled death penalty cases in this state. So one of very few defense attorneys that has done that. So,
and recent facts since the book came out, that there was some concern in the community that she left this position, but really her title changed or something, you were telling me, or she's being paid by the state instead of by the city or something, or
I don't think her title changed. It looks like they changed the way they're funding the position. She was working for the county office, who was probably getting some money from the state. That's how they do it. And now she'll be working directly from the State Department. So she's still on the case as his attorney.
But there was a tremor in the force there for a little bit.
There was. People were, oh my goodness. Also at the beginning, when we talk about coincidences, here's a big coincidence for you. When they wanted her to be the defense attorney, she was representing one of the victims' mothers in the drug consequences. She was going through a drug trial, and she decided to, because of the conflict of interest, let that go
kind of
and become
from
Brian
that.
Kohberger's attorney. So the death penalty is on the table so far in this case. So when one of the first times that we get to see her, or really heard anything of substance in a hearing about this, she she was asking for like the second or third time for evidence. She ended up asking for evidence to be turned over many, many, many times in many hearings. And she also asked for certain law enforcement officers' personnel records. That was kind of telling. Like it led for a lot of good discussion. Why does she want those? I think we know now why she wants those, but there are some involved that have some cases against them. He talked about how much information. So she's asking for the evidence to be turned over, and she gets 51 terabytes of data. And he related that to, and I've heard that online too, like on news stations, like 30 file cabinets full of paper records, or,
counting grains.
Yeah, go ahead.
Counting grains of sand on the beach.
Is that how he described it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So, and they're not very organized. So you really have to, sounds like she really has to plow through to find anything she might be looking for. And then I thought it was funny, he ends this chapter mentioning the prosecutor, Bill Thompson. There are a lot of nicknames for him because he does have a big white beard. And the author describes it as his biblical beard and mentions that he's in a band. Mm-hmm. So he is in a band. And that's how that chapter ends.
These are the participants in the upcoming trial.
In the trial.
And from the little bit that we had a chance to see of them, the prosecutor ended up shutting down and not really talking anymore. And, because
you have to let me explain that now.
Yeah. And, I think the defense, which is, important for them to kind of set the stage or get some of the stuff that they need to speak a little bit more at some of these hearings. And they did, even when they were cross-examining some witnesses and stuff, the prosecutor was really not going as in depth as the defense attorney was. So
yeah,
two formidable foes though to go at it. It seems
he got shut down in one hearing because the defense had a picture of him in a slideshow that they were presenting, and it did not paint him in a good light. And he got very vocal about it during that hearing, and it was not very becoming of him. And ever since then, he's kind of taken a back seat. And yeah, that's his story about that. So he's let his assistant take over. All right, chapter 30 starts off with the case looking more open than shut. So he's describing how the defense is going after the evidence they have, and the defense attorney has asked over and over, how did you get to my client? It doesn't look like I have all the evidence. I need you to turn it over. The prosecution keeps saying, we've given you everything. And with everything we've learned in all these chapters so far with the FBI, it looked like maybe the FBI had stuff, wasn't giving it to the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And so that's why the prosecutor was saying, well, we've given you everything we have, but they know there's more out there. So they were trying to get their hands on that. And the author says doubts were starting about his guilt, if he's really guilty or not.
Right.
So then he talks about the only evidence that they have, the touch DNA. And he does acknowledge that and he talks about how it's questionable because there's records of that coming up with false positives. There's lots of examples of touch DNA being used and coming up with false positives.
I do want to go back to the touch DNA. We're going to talk about that a little bit more,
sure.
Or you have
no, I can go back.
Okay. So the touch DNA, I think there's been a lot of speculation about why is it not good DNA and what kind of DNA is it, and the author takes a lot of time to explain it and explain the amount of DNA and where this DNA comes from. And, you know, there was some question about, you know, if I touch you and you touch this and, you know, and that it could all be that. And I don't know if it's true or not, but the author mentions in the book that the touch DNA came from a
fingerprint. He does say that.
A fingerprint. So,
because you mentioned that in the last episode, and I was like, no, it's this other thing. But I mean, that does make sense if you're touching something, and then your skin cells are on the fingerprint.
So, you know, it was kind of like there was talk about transfer, but it was just odd to me that he made that statement in this book. And again, you know, there's some liberties here, but that was pretty telling that they believe the DNA came from a fingerprint on the snap button of the sheath.
Yep. So the other lack of evidence is that there's no license plate that they've seen. He describes the mess that they had with the make and model of the car. Like, it took the FBI like 3 times to try to figure out what make and model of the car there was. And he talks about how is a jury going to react to that when they hear that, you know, that creates doubt. He talked about the technology used with the triangulation of the cell phone data and how hard that's going to be to explain and understand. And I guess there can be questions about the technology and all of that.
Well, before you go on, so maybe we can talk through this a little bit because, you know, I come from the business world. We make products, you know, and, you know, we sell those products, and some of these products go into life-saving devices, you know, and when we manufacture these products, you know, there's always this, you know, they always account, there's this error, you know, margin of error that they do, so that we know we're going to make it this much stronger, this much more flame resistant, this much more, because
to allow for
the, you know, this margin of error, right? So when they talked to, and I guess what I'm trying to equate this to is, you know, they keep saying in the book, and the author says in the book, you know, and people are talking about that the range of these cell towers could be up to 12 to 13 miles. Those are the 2 numbers that I hear from the cell tower. So I understand that that's the extent of the range, but for the majority, it's probably, you know, people are connecting to the tower closest to them, you know, and that's how they're kind of pulling some of this information that, okay, someone's in this area, you know, a little bit closer to this area because they're pinging off this tower. I'm really not looking at people 13 miles away. I'm looking at people within a close range of this tower. So, you know, to say 13 miles and, you know, someone's on their phone, you know, at Washington State University, you know, on TikTok doesn't mean they're at the King Road.
Do you think they can differentiate the difference?
No.
Like, if it pings, it pings.
Right. No, exactly.
So, they're not going to be able to tell that.
Right. So it's, you know, I guess the thing is that these towers have to be corroborated by something else.
Yes.
You know, so that's kind of the key. So you can't just use this because we talked in a way earlier episode that maybe your GPS or iPhone tracker, which measures your step, will get you within a 20 feet because that's used by GPS. Cell phone towers are a little bit different. I don't think they have any of that other stuff here, but we'll wait and see.
Right. And they can match it with video footage, things like that.
Right.
Yep. And that there's no murder weapon. So that's the lack of evidence. And then the really lack of a witness description. I mean, height and build and bushy eyebrows.
Yep.
Isn't very definitive.
No. And I think they state in the book, you know, that's probably every other male college student at Idaho could probably meet that criteria of...
Oh, yes, we've identified a lot of them.
Yeah. So, that isn't distinct enough, you know, like, you know, they had a oozing scar on their face and I saw this, you know, I mean, that's not what this is. It's very nondescript.
he did a good job of starting with how this whole case unfolded, because once Ann Taylor, the defense attorney, was asking for the evidence, and then she gets the evidence, and then it comes out the lack of the evidence, people in the community started questioning, but then he describes it that the defense got emboldened by that. So, oh, wow, they really don't have a whole lot in their opinion, the way he describes it. So he's telling the story of how they're thinking, well, then there could be there's another story out there. Something else happened. So then he's describing they're thinking through how the crime happened. And it was interesting that he described it that they're questioning, could one person really do this with the amount of time that they said that this event happened? You know, it's like really about 8 minutes it comes down to. And they said that would be like 2 minutes per person. He's pointing out all of the things everybody has questioned, that it was a horrific scene, yet there's no trail of anything leading outside.
Right.
The father of Kaylee said Kaylee fought back, but then the defendant, Brian, has no scratches, or nobody saw scratches or anything. The coroner's description of the wounds made it seem like they were different. So different wounds than possibly different weapons. This is how he described it in the book. And I told you in the PCA, they did describe them different ways. Like one was sharp, instrument. One was, I don't know, I can't remember the words now, but they did describe them differently. You looked like you're questioning something. Yeah,
I don't recollect that, but not to say that, I didn't memorize the whole book, but okay. I don't recollect that. I do know that the description in the PCA was they were describing a weapon 3 different ways, but they weren't necessarily saying it was 3 different weapons. They were just describing a weapon, like he used, just to use an example, he used a gun. He used a Colt 45. He used a sidearm as a way to describe, a piece of equipment that shoots a bullet, but it's one piece of equipment that shot a bullet.
It could be, but it leaves it open. And what his point was, all the things that are leaving it open to, so it's not definitive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that this is a big one. I don't understand why it's not being addressed, that there was 2 additional DNA found in the house. And I'm sure there was way more than that. So these 2 must be significant, like on victims, super near victims, who knows, but to single out 2, they must have been telling, and then 1 on a glove that was found outside. So he's talking about who do they belong to, and apparently there's not enough DNA to test. I don't know. I think that's what they have claimed so far, because otherwise, why not do IgG on those?
Well, so we've talked about that extensively as well, and Moscow didn't do IgG.
Oh, right.
The FBI did IgG.
Another questionable thing, yeah.
And if you're going to do this IgG and you have 3 pieces of, DNA, one is on what they consider to be the sheath of the murder weapon, one is on a lamp, and one is outside, don't even know if it's connected to this case, but outside on a mitten, a glove, and you run all 3 of those. So they've extracted DNA, right? So if you say you have DNA on it, they've been able to extract it.
And they did say male.
Okay. So they've extracted it. They run it through CODIS, right? And they're like, okay, which one of these 3 unidentified,
I get it,
made DNA do we want to run? Let's start with the one that's on the sheath of the murder weapon and go from there.
I guess I understand that, but still, it just bothers me that these 2 are out there and 3 are out there, and we don't know.
No, I understand. I heard it's like, $50,000 that the community wants to do a GoFundMe to get these other two.
Test that other DNA.
Test those other two. Let's find out who, the genealogy where it takes you.
Hey, it's been done before.
It has been. So there you go.
So he ends this chapter with that the defense came out and said, our client has no connection to the victims. Mm-hmm. There's no motive. There's no connection, then there's no motive. And then you have that big 8-hour delay of calling 911 with the victim. So add up all of that we just mentioned in this chapter, and that's all the reasons why there's this big doubt of his guilt.
For sure, I don't know if it's about his guilt from where I sit. It's about how we're going to prosecute this case with all of these anomalies.
Right, but he was speaking from the perspective of the defense in this chapter.
Exactly.
So
and Carlos just said, I feel.
Okay.
From where
that's
I
your
sit.
perspective.
Yes, from where I sit.
I don't want anybody to get confused.
No, not in the book. I was like, I feel like it's not necessarily that. It's, that I believe he's guilty, but I believe all the things that he brings up give the prosecution a bunch of trouble at trial unless they can plug those holes somehow with evidence and things that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
But that's my personal opinion.
So he ends this chapter with which I think was a big bang of information. And if some of his sources are law enforcement and people with knowledge of the case that he can't name because that's what investigative journalists have to do.
Yep.
I didn't know this. He said that the defense starts developing a theory that this has to do with drugs.
Yes.
And I felt very verified when I
It seems to be the most logical counter theory because I think before the book even came out, there were times, we talk about Hoodie Guy and, the DoorDash driver. And then, none of those really seem to, make me think, oh, you got something there.
Because you need a motive.
Yeah. This was the one that I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I would certainly, if I was a defense attorney, I'd be looking at that very closely.
I think that's the topic that has the most coincidences connected to this case. I think it's logical, timely. I just think it makes sense. So in the next chapter, but before I start, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and to your point, which I don't like to do too much, but to your point, it can bring in a bunch of people from different walks of life.
Yeah.
It could bring the police into, this drug conspiracy. It could bring, the students or the frat house into this conspiracy. It could bring in a group of 4 girls who live in a off-campus house into that conspiracy. So, Hoodie Guy can bring in the police,
right?
And and all this other stuff. So this one seems to have some legs. And if I were trying to put forward an alternate motive, right, to say, get off my client, you were looking elsewhere here,
right?
That would be the one that I could bring in. And you've talked about past sins that have been reported about police in general, the police department, frat houses in general, this particular frat house. So, it's not unfounded or unheard of. It actually has some legs.
Yes. So this next chapter, chapter 31, is all about these connections to that topic. So 3 parents of the victims and an uncle of one of them have had drug issues with the law. It's 4 adults of those 4 victims. We talked about how Ann Taylor had been representing one of the moms.
Yes.
We talked about that. There, in one of our previous episodes, we talked about this student. His name was Caden Young, and the author talks about him in this chapter. He was a student at the University of Idaho, but left and was living in another town close to Seattle, Washington. So he was in Seattle, and he had to go to the hospital for overdosing. And he was treated, and they let him go home. And he goes to a friend's apartment and didn't make it.
Yeah.
He was given those substances by that Emma that we had talked about. He talked about earlier in the book, and her boyfriend. And they spent 5 months in jail. And I guess the author in this chapter says that the defense team looked into them. There was big speculation for a while that they got off their charges. When I looked into that, it was because they just charged them in the wrong. That's what they say. They charged them in the wrong jurisdiction, but I don't know if they've ever recharged them in the correct jurisdiction. So it made it look like they gave up information. So if they're connected to anything going on in this case, that's what it looks like. So then the author, I was surprised by this. He goes on to describe Demetrius, Emma's boyfriend, and that he's violent. He has a rap sheet for some violent things. So harassment charges, suspended license. He gives their history together. He really goes in talking about those two. Talked about how Emma's from that area, went to that high school. She did attend the University of Idaho for a little while, but didn't finish. He even went so far as to say that the drugs come from Seattle, Washington, and then get sold in Moscow. He mentions the friend of Demetrius. This person's name is Tanner Aspire. I was surprised that the way he talks about him is he's Demetrius's friend, and he's talking to him because he wants to start a business where they're going to fish and sell fish. To me, it just seemed like he wanted to mention his name. I don't know, because that was a really weird thing to put in this book. He doubles down and says that this Demetrius has an anger problem. And then he ends this chapter talking about how the defense was seriously looking into narcotics as the motive for the murders. So twice he's mentioning that in here.
Do you think it's Demetrius that they're trying to hone in on?
I don't.
Take it out of the book. Do you think it's Demetrius they're trying to hone in on?
I think that is a strong suspect for a person, especially I didn't know his background like this, but I have heard those two names. I thought there was more, a lot. I thought there was more of a connection, like verified evidence. Like I mentioned that I thought Emma was in that one video, but I was corrected in the comments because I thought there was literally a video of her coming out of a house or out of the house, and people said no, that was not her. There's a lot of speculation. Someone that was a student there spoke publicly and said, oh, yeah, she's known for being in there. But that's just hearsay. Yeah. Hearsay. But yes, I do think somehow there's all of this makes sense. Who the people are, I'm not sure, but those two names come up a lot. Chapter 32 starts off with, so he's still going into the drug theory. And he said that in the county that Moscow is in, the sheriff's department has a task force. And they have been trying to tackle this problem for a long time. And they're going after MDMA and the white stuff. I had to look up what that was.
Tell
that
us.
substance. I don't know if we can say that stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, then don't tell us. Look it up on your own. MDNA. There you go.
It rhymes with poly.
There you go.
It rhymes with mextasy.
There you go.
Okay. But the interesting part about this sheriff's task force is, according to the author, whoever he spoke to, said that they do use college kids as informants. They will get college kids in trouble, a small bust, and then they will make them, and they will scare the bejesus out of them, and then tell them, well, you won't get in trouble if you will go undercover, or you'll just like be an informant for us. Get us someone higher up the ladder is the approach that they take.
So let me ask you this, because I've heard that stated in, a benign way like you just did. I've heard it stated in nefarious ways. You're a college student, okay? So go back a couple years to when you're in college. So you're a college student, say freshman, sophomore year, right? Okay, just kind of being on your own. But you've just left your parents' house 6 months to a year ago. You get pulled over by the cops, and now you're facing some serious charges that you're going to have to go back to your parents.
Oh, terrified.
Yeah. In that situation, if they say, hey, who gave you this? And you say, I ain't saying a word. I'm willing to take 100% of the consequences. I'm not afraid of my parents. I'm not afraid of getting kicked out of college. Bring it on. Or is 18, 19-year-old Kimberly saying, it's Joe Smith, and he lives right over there.
I can't. You're putting me on the spot on public.
You would sing like a canary.
First, I would be bawling.
Yeah, bawling first. Yeah, I agree. And to think of it for myself, too, because I had a lot riding on
I'd
going
be
to
a rat.
Yeah. But I just think of myself, hey, this isn't a gender thing, right? It wasn't, I'm going to get, some girl to roll over on Joe Smith, who lives right over there.
Right.
I look at my situation. I was on scholarship. If I did anything, my grades, any behavior unbecoming, anything like that, I would lose that scholarship. So I was not playing around, which was one of the reasons why I didn't want to live in a dorm with all the other crazed college students. I wanted to be in a place where I could mind my P's and Q's, off campus. So if I was in that situation and a cop approached me and said, hey, you could either tell your parents, lose your scholarship, get kicked out of school, or tell me where you got this from, I would be like, that's Joe Smith, and he lives right over there.
Right.
So informant is, yeah.
It could be as little as that. Yeah. It even sounded like, I don't know if he said it in this book, but I have heard it described elsewhere that it was a little bit more than that, like go make some buys for us. And actually, when I was looking that up, there were some cases, I know one was in Florida, where law enforcement did put some college students up to that, and they did not come back from that situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they put them in such a dangerous, and things go wrong. That's a very scary situation. So yeah, he just completely rats out the towns that these substances are coming from, with Seattle and Spokane, and then those are the bigger cities where they're coming from and going out to the small towns. He names the sheriff, Brett Myers.
Hold on 1 second. Just because you're a literary genius and I take cues from you on how to enunciate and pronunciate things, and you could cut this out if you want to. You said Spokane.
Yeah. Oh, Spokane.
Is it Spokane or is it Spokane?
I think it's spelled Spokane, but I do think people say Spokane.
Oh, okay. I thought I really learned something here. I was
so now that we've said it 10 times, I'll edit it the right way.
Okay. I'm curious though if it is Spokane or Spokane.
It's spelled like it's Spokane, and I think people who aren't from there probably say it that way, but I think if you're from there, you say Spokane.
Spokane. Okay.
So this sheriff conjectured about Emma and Demetrius leading to the drug connection. This is very telling, I think, information in here.
Yeah.
If he has a source that's been feeding him some little nuggets. And I guess I'm just saying it that way because people have been like bashing this book, and I get it. We're going to talk about that at the end.
Yes.
But who's to say he doesn't have someone he's talking to and can verify it? Because we've all been talking about these two people forever online.
Well, and I guess, the cat's out of the bag already, but he states that he talked to a lot of people. And he wasn't just talking to people that, proved that Kohberger was guilty. He was trying to find both sides of it, and he dedicates one whole, part. Yeah. There's only 6 parts of this, and part 6 is this big. Yeah. This big.
Yeah, part 6 is small.
So there's only really 5 parts of this, and 1/5 of the book is about the defense. And hey, this isn't as solid and lockstep as you think it is. So
and he did that even though he's going to come out and say he doesn't really agree with that.
As am I at the end as well.
He also mentions the 6th roommate that
hadn't moved in yet.
Well, he described it that she did sign the lease, she did move in, but as soon as she moved in, she was like moving out to go be with a boyfriend or something. Her name is Ashlyn Couch. He says she never moved in, but visited.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I heard that somewhere else about the moving in, then moving out.
Okay.
He says in this chapter that Ashlyn Couch followed Emma Bailey on Instagram. So he's making these connections.
Yeah.
Do these people know each other?
Right.
So that's connecting her to the house. She at least knew somebody who was trying to live in that house at one point.
Yep.
Then he starts speculating. Could Emma have possibly known Brian Kohberger? Could they have possibly met at that pool party? He doesn't know that, but and then he starts talking about how, which I didn't know this either, I guess the police scoured all the videos and pictures they could get of that pool party because they're trying to make a connection to him.
Yes. And there was none that Blum states that they got from that party. And they asked everybody who attended, even folks who didn't even know that guy was there, hey, if you took pictures at this event,
we just need your photos.
Just need your photos, and nothing turned up to
the They were looking for the victims, and none of the victims were there.
Victim, right?
Right.
Yeah,
well, true.
Like Emma, and that didn't even show up. So
he mentions that Emma only lives a minute or 2 from the house. I don't know how he ended this chapter, but that's the last note that I took. So, 3 good chapters on the defense and all the questionable evidence and the drug theory motive.
So the way it started was I really thought this chapter, right? Because I paid pretty close attention because, again, I like to say I like to listen to the other side and to gather as much information as possible. And the way he started this part, or this, these chapters within this part, I really thought he was going to go against the defense, because of that saying he says at the beginning, right? If you have facts, pound the facts. If you don't have facts, pound the table. So I thought he was going to say, they think they have some facts, but really they're just pounding the table. They're just kind of doing sleight of hand, and trying to either put out these motions or something. And that really didn't happen.
And that's not what he was
It's not what.
saying.
So here I was kind of going into it thinking, they're going to debunk everything that, the defense is going to try. And that did not happen in this. So, if anybody, on the Kohberger side has access to this book, I'm not saying going out and buy it or anything, but if you have access to it, if there's any part that you want to listen to, make it part number 5.
Part 5.
Part 5. That would be interesting listening or reading. Listening in my case, reading in everybody else's.
So part 6 is called Steve's Story, and that is Kaylee's dad. And the author is going to explain how he really went on a mission to do his own investigating. What do you mean
by hiring a private detective. He even tried to go out there himself and really was trying to solve the case because he felt the police wasn't doing an adequate job or sharing, things with him. So just to set the foundation.
Yes, very good. Police weren't talking to him. He really railed against them a couple times on there's lots of interviews with him you can see. But so all the things he tried to do, he even spoke to a convict in a prison somewhere that tried to say, hey, I know some information. And then that went nowhere. And then.
Well, let's speak about that because that went nowhere. Why? Right. So from what I remember from the book was Howard Blum sets the stage that there was an informant, right? Somebody who was going to, a jailhouse informant was going to give him some really good information about this case.
Yes.
So he's intrigued. He wants to solve the murder of his daughter. So he gets an investigator. He puts a lot of money into this, and they go in to try to vet it out. It turns out that this convict was conning him and
just trying to get a deal so he could get out earlier or something, or get a lesser sentence.
Yeah, or some money, or say put some money on my commissary or whatever. Whatever it is they do, but it was just a really heart-wrenching thing to think that, someone reached out to me. They know I'm the father of one of these victims. They want to help me out. I believe the best in people, even if they're in jail. He really puts a lot of time and effort into us, and he was just being conned the whole time. Horrible.
Very horrible. So then he got his hands on a couple videos, and the way the author described these, I could not make out which videos he was talking about.
Oh yeah, we could find them though.
I could dive into it more to really try to find out. So he describes one as a grainy light bulb cam
from Linda Lane.
Did he actually say that?
I thought I heard him say Linda Lane.
I just wrote that on my notes. I was like, is that the one he's describing? Because he didn't say it. But when he says video of neighborhood, I don't know.
I thought he said Linda Lane because I couldn't pull that out of thin air. My question is, what's the significance of Linda Lane?
Oh my goodness. We'll have to watch those videos. So Linda Lane is the video that was released in parts, and there are 3 or 4 hours that were released from like midnight to 4 a.m. And they say it was a quiet night. There were cars coming and going, people getting dropped off. It's a camera that sits outside of an apartment building, and it captures the whole parking lot, the noise from the apartment building, a alleyway between a couple of apartments heading towards the park. And you can see when they say he does a 3-point turn, it's right there. So then the author talks about cameras that Steve got his hands on, and he describes one as a grainy light bulb cam. It turned out that it was fake. It was a video of the neighborhood. And the reason he found out it was fake was because he hired a professional videographer that proved to him that it was fake. So when he said neighborhood video, I at first thought, is he talking about Linda Lane? But I do remember some other videos coming out that showed stuff, and then people were like, no, that was fake. But no one has said that the Linda Lane videos are fake yet. So I don't think that's what the one he was talking about.
So I know that, in every online interaction, there's a few trolls out there.
There's been some doozies.
Yeah, man, that's just a bummer for Steve here because
that's horrific.
And I think it take the monetary portion out of it, where he had to spend a lot of money to have this guy look at this, right? To validate it. And he's like, yeah, it's fake, and I guess if you're trying to authenticate something, you're going to pay a pretty penny, and, you hope it's real, but if it's fake, you're still paying for the authentication. So, that money's gone. But the worst part about that is there was hope of, because I think this video that they speak of was more than one person or something, or did we know about this fake video and what the contents were or anything like that?
I don't remember that one, but I'm looking at my next note, and it says that Steve actually leaked another time-stamped video of an address adjacent nearby the road, which that is probably the Linda Lane videos. And those are time-stamped. Like, you can see the rolling, just like a video camera.
Right.
Time-stamped. So, yeah, and he has spoken to a lot of online investigators, like people with YouTube channels or TikToks, and has shared some information. So people do know a few things that he's said.
Well, and I guess to give the community credit, because there's two sides to all of this. There have been major cases that have been solved by online sleuths, so it's not a phenomenon, it's a reality.
That's right.
So yes, this is an opportunity to get people who are a little bit more forthcoming with things that they find out, and he can get that. So for him to attach himself to online sleuths to help get some information that, he can help pay for or help validate or authenticate makes sense. It's just a shame that there was a bit of a money grab during this, where people saw
disgusting that happened.
Hey, here's a vulnerable guy. Here's an opportunity to put something out there and pretend that it's real, and and then I can get my name and get some clicks or whatever. And yeah, that's horrible. So there's a fine line in all this, I guess.
So then the author says that Steve did not believe the drug theory. He did not believe that, and he's explaining it in this part that the reason is because the victims didn't have anything in their systems from the toxicology, according to Steve.
According to Steve, yeah, they haven't released that, but
just because they didn't have it in their system doesn't mean that this wasn't related to it. I don't know. So
and it's funny because the majority of them are out there partying that night.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be using, while you're drinking,
but it wasn't a crazy night.
No, it wasn't a crazy night. But if you're going to go,
like it.
Yeah, or is there some residual left over from, because
it does stay in your system.
Yeah, for a little while. But yeah, just interesting that they weren't at that time, have any drugs in their system.
So this next thing I thought was a little risky to put in here. Someone might get in trouble, but the author says that Steve was in touch with an FBI agent.
Yes, I like this part.
In St. Louis.
Yes.
And that agent wanted to help him and talk to him. He was very sympathetic to him.
Yep.
But he didn't want to get in trouble, so he would use his personal email to contact him. That was a lot of information to put in there that person could probably get narrowed down. But the other way that Steve would get information is finding sympathetic law enforcement people who would be willing to talk to him. And he found people, he didn't say who, that knew two of the grand jurors. So they didn't have a preliminary hearing for this case. The prosecutors just went straight to a grand jury. So evidence has been testified to at a grand jury. We don't know what that evidence is, but Steve has found out some of it. I did hear recently that Bethany testified at the grand jury.
Oh, that they were texting each other.
Yes, and
that's what came from the grand. See, I need a clicker.
Thank you
to get that memory to go back. Yes,
this is very telling. So some of the information that Steve was able to find out from his sources were that there was a dark blue Dickie purchased.
You did have it. You're holding out on me.
There's three things here. Yes.
Yeah. I remember now.
I think they said from a Walmart or something.
Yes.
But so they found the receipt for it, but they can't find the actual Dickie.
Okay, so when you say Dickie, which is a funny word.
It's not the fake neck turtleneck. It's the one-piece work suit.
Right.
You know, zip up, whatever.
Gotcha. Okay.
That. There's a record of a K-bar purchase, and that was rumored in the press. So that was related to a search warrant they did for Amazon, I believe. They were looking for anybody in the area that had purchased a K-bar. And apparently there's a rumor that like came back with something.
So my understanding from the book was that they had a receipt for that purchase, either online or physical. That's what he got from the grand jury, people who leaked the grand jury information.
Maybe. I wrote down that they had a receipt for the Dickie. I didn't
both, I believe.
know about.
Receipts,
okay.
Yeah.
Then the big thing from the grand jury was that
Yes.
Bethany and Dylan were awake
Yes.
during the crime
During the attacks.
and heard everything.
Everything.
And were texting each other.
Texting each other. I'm echoing because that I had not heard that before.
There's no way he could put that in this book. If someone of credible value, now remember, he's saying this is what Steve found out from the grand jury.
From the grand jury,
so
people who leaked the information.
It is telephone. It is
Yes.
hearsay.
It is narrative nonfiction.
It is, but as much as we want to be mad at this author for writing this book, we all talk about these things all the time on our shows, on with each other or whatever. So that was, if that's true, oh my God.
And I think he adds a little personal narrative to that. I could be wrong, but I think he even states that he even describes the house, that how could they not? Like, this was a big events going on.
Paper thin walls.
Paper thin walls. He describes the house. Someone yelling, what are you doing here or something?
Someone's here.
Someone's here. So all this is being...
I'm here to help you.
Yeah, I'm here to... All this stuff is being heard, but I always painted Dylan as somebody who was hearing some things, not being able to make sense of it, right? What was going on, because why is a dog whimpering? Why are they yelling upstairs? Why is someone here? Who's here to help us? I'm going to look out the door for the third time and then see somebody clad, which you like to say, in black with bushy eyebrows walk past me, so I shut the door immediately and go hunker down and hide in my bed and then fall asleep or pass out because I'm in shock, and come to find out that may not be the narrative.
Right.
And it's something that I kind of hung on to, not that she needs defended in any way, but in her defense, it explains some of her actions. Mm-hmm. This is counterintuitive to
it
explaining.
It doesn't make them look very good.
It doesn't.
And it also gives more credence to the fact that Bethany might have exculpatory evidence, like whatever she heard, because it sounds like her experience was different than, I don't know. It's also why people question, were they even there? Like, if they're awake and texting and not there, that also cuts them a little bit. If they're not involved, cuts them some slack with that. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. But what I do know is the author in the book kind of states, if they're texting back and forth during and after this event, why did neither of them? And I think he's asking the question to the reader.
Yes.
But it almost sounds like he's asking the question for himself.
Yeah.
Why didn't they call anybody? He even says, why didn't you even call a friend?
Yes.
Forget the 911. Why didn't you call a friend? And it's almost like he's inserting his own narrative in that part.
Yeah.
Because that was so shocking, it seemed to shock him as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So then the other piece of information that this might have been out in the community, I don't know, I didn't know this, that Steve somehow started thinking that the government had a protected source.
Yes.
Whether someone told him or whatever. And he went on a mission, the way that this is described in this chapter, to find out who that informant is. There's a protected informant, and he wants to confront them because he wants to know what happened to his kid.
Right.
So
and this informant had damning evidence.
The author describes them as a witness.
Yes.
A witness.
Right. And a witness could be, I mean, he could be
to
on the
testify to
yeah,
something.
he could be a witness.
Okay,
he could
I took it as a witness,
no,
like
to the murder. Yeah,
can I get a witness?
No, Steve could go on the witness stand and be a literal witness.
Right,
but yeah.
Okay.
But this person had very important information, and I won't steal your thunder on where they got it from. So go ahead.
They had the informant, or he wanted to find out what happened to his daughter, and so he was super close. Like, it sounds like he was just about to like go confront this person,
right.
And the FBI stopped him because the witness had called the tip line, and the tip line promises
anonymity.
Yeah, anonymity and confidentiality. And they were like, look, you will interfere with this case if you do this. And that's like, they had to stop him.
I think it was a step beyond that. I think it was were doing something illegal if you do this.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Not that you'll interfere with the case. I'd be like, I don't care.
Well, that's
I want to find out what's going on.
Well, the integrity of the case. Oh, and illegal because you're messing with an FBI investigation.
Yeah. So there was like, a statute or a code that he was breaking that he could have been arrested.
Yes.
And he's
and
like,
big
all right.
trouble.
Yeah, big trouble. Yeah. Because it's federal.
Yes.
You
So he had to stop. How much torture can one person go through? I don't know if I'd be like, put me in jail. At least I would know the answer. I don't know.
So can I go to the tip line now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we heard earlier in the book that there were 20,000 tips that came in on.
I think so.
In different formats. 9,000 of them were the tip line. The phone call, like call in.
I don't remember the exact
was
numbers.
like, hey, I sent a text message or an email, but there was like tip line was like 9,000. One of those supposedly made it to the grand jury because that's where this came from, right? This is where he got this information.
It sounds like it, according to what is written in this chapter.
Yes. So one of those tips came from the tip line. That this person who is, nobody knows who they are, except for maybe the FBI and the prosecuting attorneys and maybe the defense attorneys. I don't know. I'm assuming they're going to have to talk to them.
Know.
Yeah, they should know. But the father found out who this person could be. They tried to reach out, hey, you're breaking the law. But to be that close, and I think that's what, because you said he doesn't believe in the drug theory.
Yeah.
I think, and then Howard Blum at the end kind of gives his, theory. So they may know a little bit more about this informant, of
that
this.
Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with that.
Anything, which could get them saying, hey, this could be, hasn't been presented publicly, but this could be very, bad evidence against Koberger.
Well, and you would think that, but the defense is still like, you don't have anything, but I don't know. I don't know if they have everything from the grand jury. So.
I've never seen a defense attorney, walk into the court and just cowtail, be like, it's hard for me to explain that. If you have the facts, pound the facts. If you don't have the facts, pound the table. They're going to go in there and pound the table.
I think there is some legalities with a confidential informant. So that might be one of the parts that they've either had to have hearings about or need to have hearings about. I'm not sure about that. So there's only a couple more things for the end of Steve's chapter, and just that he made statements that to an online sleuth. So Steve is speaking to an online sleuth and telling them there's so much more to this than what's in the media.
Of course.
Which is basically, so far, up until these little tidbits, what this book is. This book is written on basically what's been reported in mainstream media, except this part, and Steve saying there's way more to it than that. And then he ends with the anger that Steve is feeling. And so now he can't do his investigation. He can't go to the person he really wants the information from. So he turns his attention to the anger he's feeling, and he's going to make sure no matter who it is, they're going to get the death penalty. His family is 1,000% for the death penalty. And they actually passed a law or they're trying to pass, I think they did pass it, in Idaho, that just in case there's no chemicals available to perform that the person could go in front of a firing squad. And he's like, all for that. And that's how the chapters end. Yeah, Part 6 ends.
That's the way to end it right there.
And then he just ends with an epilogue because some extra additional information, the house was destroyed. A lot of people will say that's your biggest piece of evidence. Why destroy that? And that was tore down this past December. And
he states in the book that the school asked for it to be torn down, wanted it to be torn down, demanded it to be torn down. And once people cleared it and said, okay, they tore it down immediately. So it was the school's request to tear that down.
So that was shady because they hurried up and emptied out the house. They got everything out of there. The chief of police pulled up a U-Haul to the house, and they just took all their belongings, took them away, gave some things back to the families. Then the owner of the house sold the house to the university. So the university could make the decision to tear down the house because we don't want that.
Yep.
They were supposed to have a preliminary hearing that got... Oh, no, it's not the preliminary hearing. The trial, the actual trial. A lot of people thought they were trying to have it this summer.
Right.
It's now postponed until next summer, 2025. Right. He starts asking questions. What's this trial going to reveal? There's so much out there. Experts from both sides are going to... Yeah, he's basically like... What's going to come out of this trial, because they're both going to go after the DNA. We're going to bring experts to defend it. We're going to bring experts to tear it apart. What's the jury going to be left with? And he made it seem like they're going to do that with everything.
Everything. Cell phone towers. Like
cell phone.
Cy-Ray. Cy-Ray's been kind of a big community hero, right? Because he's helping the defense. There's going to be another Cy-Ray for the DNA. It's just his name's not Cy-Ray. They're going to have a Cy-Ray for that. They're going to have a Cy-Ray for, looking at cars and distinguishing what years the cars are. They're going to have a Cy-Ray for every single thing. And the prosecution's going to have their own Ray Cy to do the exact opposite. So it's just, and he states in the book here, it's just competing experts almost canceling each other out.
Yeah, that's the way he describes it.
And leaving it to the jury to say, hey, what do you think about this? Mm-hmm. What can you discern from all this?
There are some experts that are way more renowned than others, but it's going to be expert versus expert.
Exactly.
So yes, I thought this was interesting. He did explain how he got the title of the book, When the Night Comes Falling, and he explained how he was out there one night when the house was still up. And I think he was just sitting in his car, taking it all in, and he was startled by the security guard that was there, right? And
he was actually standing outside, and the security guard hit him with a spotlight and said, "Be careful, there's ice there." So he wasn't...
Yeah, it's slippery.
It's slippery. Yeah. So he was outside the car. He was, somewhere. I couldn't tell if he was overlooking or right near the house. There seemed to be two different descriptions there. But... when he hit him with that light, he was like, oh my God, like it startled him to the point where he was like, what if you woke up in the middle of the night with somebody?
Yeah,
and that's how he felt startled in that, because he's in a scary place.
Yeah,
that you're already kind of on edge, and all of a sudden, bam! It
did catch him off guard.
Yes.
He made the point to say that this is really a story with no survivors, like that it's just affected everybody involved. They're only going to be left with questions of why, or right now we're only left with questions of why. He does say he thinks they have the right person. He thinks Brian Kohberger is guilty. He thinks Maddie was the target.
Yes.
He thinks it started on the 3rd floor. That's where she was sleeping, her and Kaylee. He ends it by saying that he thinks Dylan and Brian Kohberger, like when she sees him, and he's leaving after the event, supposedly according to him, she's just seen the person, and they're both having this paralyzed feeling. So he kind of, this is again his literary devices, I think. 2
things. I need to back up on the first one. Blum felt it was a targeted attack. So if you could clarify this one point that he talks about in the book. He says that he believes Maddie is the target.
Yes.
And that he immediately goes to Maddie's room.
Yes.
Was Maddie's room where the dog was?
No.
So he didn't immediately go to Maddie's room. He went to a room where there was maybe somebody else and encountered a dog, then went to Maddie's room.
Nobody knows for sure that he went to the dog room first. That's just like speculation.
Well, let's assume.
That's according to Dylan describing the dog barking, so someone just guessing that that's where he went.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's assume that.
And he's just guessing that he went straight to Maddie's room. So they're both guesses.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Okay. So I think we showed in episode of 3D model of them going through the house and going to because the dog reacted to something, and maybe what you're saying is it could have just been him walking up the steps.
Yes,
the dog could have reacted to it, couldn't it?
Sure.
Maybe it wasn't him necessarily opening the door, but opened the door to Maddie's room. But he feels like it was a targeted attack. Okay, and then the last thing that you just read there before. About
the paralyzed thing. He just really described that.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So he described them in a similar state, but different.
Yes.
And I thought that was pretty interesting how he did
that's
it.
That's the artistic part of his writing, yeah.
And what he said was Dylan could have been paralyzed by fear or not understanding what was going on, and the killer, I believe Kohberger, was in a manic state. Mm-hmm. And in both of theirs, they probably had like some tunnel vision, and there was, a lot of things and they were going on that maybe they didn't even recognize that they had come face to face, like that. But that was interesting.
He did some good descriptive writing there. Yeah. So then he also explains, he thinks Maddie was the target, and he thinks he saw her at the Mad Greek.
Yes.
So that's definitely not verified publicly because there's no connection. And the Mad Greek is that he's never been here. We don't have any record of him being here. So these are just his thoughts and what he thinks.
Right.
He just published them into a book.
And how would he know which room was Maddie's room?
I don't know. She did have her pink cowboy boots in the window.
Oh, well, there you go.
So,
all right. So you didn't have to do any interior reconnaissance. You could do it from the exterior of the house.
I don't know. That house was pretty confusing. It's not a straight shot to get places in that house. It had a weird layout, very weird layout. The very, very ending of the book, the last part, is called Notes on Sources.
Yes.
So he does address as much as he could about where his information came from.
And he does it in a way to say, he, has this little discussion with the audience about, look, I'm, just a distinguished writer, and I follow some of the for me to write this book in this way, and he talks about what a narrative nonfiction is a little bit. So you had talked about that. He talks a little bit about that. This is why I wrote it this way. Basically, everything that you're getting here is things that I've either had a conversation with a relative, or I just take. The majority of this was from articles that came out, things that were online, things that were on news stations. And I really tried to pull some of what I felt were some of the best journalists that were reporting on this, the most reputable ones. And he starts listing some of those, someone from Seattle, someone from Washington, someone from the New York Times. Those were the people I started pulling some of this information from. And then the rest of it, where I was getting feelings and emotions and, how people felt in those things, was basically conversations that I had with friends, family members, law enforcement. And I just didn't take one. I made sure I had, kind of a backup of, some of that information that I shared, in the book. So, yeah, and I think he even admits, did I take some liberties to help tell the story, and he even goes into if it's in quotation marks. Now I can't see quotation marks because I'm listening to it.
Yeah, right. We couldn't. yeah,
but
that would be a benefit.
I mentioned in the last episode there were a few points in the book where he would say fact,
yes,
and then he would state something and then a fact. But if you physically have the book, and he says anything that's in quotations is 100%.
What somebody said. So I just thought it was, I think he knew that there was going to be some backlash about this. So he kind of got in front of it by doing this, which was super smart. Yeah.
Because it wasn't like, oh, you're getting some criticism, so now you're putting this out. He published it this way.
Yeah.
Because he knew that there could be some of that.
Yeah, feedback. And he said he tried to talk to some people and they wanted paid. And he's like, look, I come from old school journalism and we don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't do that. So he just...
Now, he did say that he got paid. He got paid to write this book.
Yeah.
There's also a mini series or some documentary that he will be a part of that he will be paid. And he goes, and the people that I talked to knew that, and they in turn wanted to be paid. And he's like, for me, I want to get, I'd rather not pay people. I want to get, the truth without coercion in some way. And he didn't say that, but that's what he was alluding to.
And this is his lifelong job. I mean, he's always been an investigative reporter or author of books. So, I think makes sense to me that if that's what you do for a living, you're going to write about something that's popular. But I know there's strong opinions on it. We've had some comments about not promoting the book, and I don't feel like we're promoting it. I like to read, and so when a book comes out about something that I'm interested in, I wanted to read it. I wanted to talk about it. So, you just take it for what it is,
I would have never picked up this book, audio or otherwise, and read it if we didn't do this podcast. I think this was just something we enjoy doing. I enjoy doing it with you. You're kind of a cutie, so I like doing this. I'm cutting that
out.
Okay. But this is, I wouldn't pick up this book and read it, but for what we're doing, and I think it's a way to continue to talk about something with a few new nuggets and maybe rehash some things that are a year old to bring them a little bit to the forefront, because in about a year's time,
hopefully we'll all know,
and we're building a lot of documented discussion about this case by us doing this. we can go back a year from now and say,
that'll be interesting.
Oh, I can't wait, and I'd be like, wow, you really had that one. You called that one, Kim, or, so I think that's going to be.
Or how wrong were we? Oh my goodness.
Well, either way, I think there's going to be things like, wow, that never made it to the public. How did they keep that quiet?
Yes.
I think there's going to be a lot of that too.
I do too. I do too.
This last episode on this book has been a doozy. Any final thoughts about the book from your perspective?
Nope. This concludes. It's our 5-part series. We thought it was going to be 6, but we did it in 5.
We did it in 5. So yeah, excellent. I enjoyed doing it. So it was informational for me.
Yep. We're not sure what our next topic is going to be for our next video, but whatever we discuss, we hope that you enjoy listening to us and you will come back to hear about our next topic. And please let us know your thoughts about this ending of the book in the comments, and
subscribing. Let's talk about subscribers,
and
right?
Subscribe.
So we've been, since we started this, I think we're about 100 subscribers away from our goal. Just this section of our podcast, which was the Howard Blum book. We started this about 100 subscribers away from reaching our goal of 500 subscribers. So by the second episode, we're about 89 away. We
were laughing about that. We're like, we got one more.
Third episode comes along. We know why we were taping this show. We're 43 away.
Yep.
This episode, before we sat down in these chairs.
Yep, we were 4 away, so we know we're so close. So we just want to thank everybody
yes.
For helping us reach that goal.
Yes.
That meant a lot to us, and we're going to look to see who the 500th person is going to be and give a little shout out.
That's right. Yep, that's awesome. So appreciate the support. Thank you very much.
Yes, and we'll see you back here on our next episode.
Bye.
Bye.